On January 15, 2001, 18-year-old Bridget Townsend was at a rural home in Bandera County, Texas. She was alone at the home of her boyfriend when Ramiro Gonzales, who was also 18 at the time, entered the property. According to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, Gonzales kidnapped and sexually assaulted an 18-year-old woman before fatally shooting her. TDCJ lists the offense date as January 15, 2001, and the county as Medina County. AP later reported that Gonzales kidnapped Bridget from a rural home northwest of San Antonio, took her to his family's ranch in neighboring Medina County, sexually assaulted her, and killed her. For more than a year, Bridget's family did not know where she was. They had no body, no funeral, no final answer. Then the case took a turn. Gonzales was arrested and convicted in another case involving the kidnapping and rape of a Bandera County real estate agent. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences. But while waiting to be transferred to prison, he asked to speak with the sheriff. And then he confessed. KSAT reported that Gonzales admitted he had abducted Bridget Townsend, taken her to a remote part of a hill country ranch, raped her, and shot her. In a later interview, he said confessing was the right thing to do. That confession led authorities to Bridget's remains. It gave her family the answer they had been waiting for. But it also gave prosecutors the case that would send Ramiro Gonzales to death row. Years later, Gonzales would ask for mercy. He would say he had changed. He would say he had found faith. He would apologize to Bridget's family from the execution chamber. But before the apology, before the Clemency video, before the final statement, before the words, "Warden, I'm ready," there was the crime.
An 18-year-old woman was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, killed, and hidden for more than a year. This is the story of what Ramiro Gonzales did, why Texas sentenced him to death, and why his execution became one of the most complicated death penalty cases of 2024. Before we get started, please like and subscribe for more stories like this. By the time Ramiro Gonzales confessed to Bridget Townsend's murder, he was already in serious trouble. He had been convicted in another violent case. KSAT reported that in 2002, Gonzales was convicted of kidnapping and raping a Bandera County real estate agent. He received 2 life sentences for that crime. While waiting to be transferred to prison, Gonzales asked to speak with Sheriff James McMillan. He told the sheriff he knew what happened to Bridget Townsend's murder. At first, the confession was not easy to fully believe. Bridget had been missing for a long time. There had been questions. There had been pain. There had been no body. But Gonzales gave authorities information that eventually led them to her remains. AP reported that Bridget's body was not found until October 2002, after Gonzales led authorities to her remains in southwest Texas. For Bridget's family, that discovery ended one nightmare and began another. They finally knew where she was, but now they had to face what had been done to her. And for Gonzales, the confession meant he was no longer only serving life sentences for a different crime. He was now tied directly to Bridget Townsend's murder.
The confession became a central part of the case. In the 2016 KSAT interview, Gonzales said confessing was the right thing to do. He explained that hearing about Bridget's mother affected him deeply. But that confession did not erase the crime. It did not bring Bridget back. It did not remove the suffering her family had lived with. It gave prosecutors the facts they needed. And eventually, Gonzales was charged with capital murder. In 2006, a Texas jury sentenced him to death. TDCJ records show Gonzales was received on death row on September 27, 2006. He was 23 years old when he entered Texas death row. At trial, the question was not just whether Gonzales had committed the crime. He had confessed. The bigger question became whether he should be sentenced to death. And in Texas, one of the key issues in a death penalty case is future dangerousness. The jury had to consider whether Gonzales would remain a continuing threat. That question would follow his case for years. During the punishment phase of the trial, prosecutors presented evidence and expert testimony to argue that Gonzales should receive the death penalty. One of the witnesses was forensic psychiatrist Dr. Edward Grippen. At the time, Grippen testified in a way that supported the idea that Gonzales would remain dangerous in the future. Years later, that testimony became one of the most controversial parts of the case. The Marshall Project reported that Grippen later changed his view. After reevaluating Gonzales, he no longer believed that if Gonzales were sentenced to life without parole, he would be a future danger. That created a major argument for Gonzales' legal team. They were not arguing that Bridget Townsend was alive. They were not arguing that Gonzales had not confessed. They were not arguing that the crime was not terrible. Their argument was different. They argued that the man Texas planned to execute was not the same person who committed the crime at 18. They argued that Gonzales had changed, that he had matured, that he had found faith, that he had shown remorse, that he had accepted responsibility, and that the expert prediction that helped justify his death sentence had later been called into question. On death row, Gonzales became known among supporters for his religious transformation. The Marshall Project reported that he earned a certificate in Bible studies and counseled other prisoners in a faith-based program known as the God Pod. He also attempted to donate a kidney to a stranger. That detail became one of the most unusual parts of the case. In 2022, Gonzales asked for a reprieve so he could donate a kidney. Texas Tribune reported that the request was denied. To his supporters, the kidney request showed that Gonzales was trying to give life back in the only way he could. To those who opposed clemency, it did not change what he had done. And that became the central tension of the case. Can someone commit an unforgivable crime at 18 and later become someone meaningfully different? Or should the punishment be based only on the crime itself? For Bridget Townsend's family, the answer was deeply personal. They had lost Bridget. They had waited more than a year to find her body. They had lived for more than 2 decades with the pain of what Gonzales did. No apology could return Bridget. No religious transformation could undo the crime. No act of remorse could give back the life that was taken. As the execution date approached in 2024, Gonzales' lawyers made one final push. They argued that he no longer posed a future danger. They pointed to Dr. Grippen's changed opinion. They pointed to Gonzales' conduct in prison. They pointed to his religious transformation. They pointed to his remorse. They argued that the legal basis for his death sentence had weakened. Texas Tribune reported that Gonzales' legal team also raised concerns about his earlier post-conviction review, arguing that he had not received a full and fair chance to present evidence about his childhood trauma, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and other background factors. A group of religious leaders also asked Texas officials to spare his life. They argued that Gonzales could continue serving others in prison, even if he never went free. But the state did not accept that argument. Prosecutors focused on the crime. They focused on Bridget Townsend. They focused on Gonzales' history. They argued that the death sentence should stand. AP reported that prosecutors described Gonzales as a sexual predator and argued that the jury had reached the right decision. The Texas Attorney General's office said the punishment case was overwhelming and that even without Grippen's testimony, the outcome would not have changed. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles rejected clemency. AP reported that the board voted 7-0 against commuting Gonzales' death sentence and also rejected a 6-month reprieve. Then the case went to the U.S. Supreme Court. About an hour and a half before the execution was scheduled to begin, the Supreme Court declined to intervene. At that point, the legal path had nearly closed. The clemency request had failed. The reprieve request had failed. The Supreme Court had refused to stop the execution. Texas was going forward.
On June 26, 2024, Ramiro Gonzales was taken to the execution chamber at the state penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas.
That date carried another layer of pain. AP reported that Bridget Townsend would have turned 41 that same day. In the execution chamber, Gonzales spoke to Bridget's family. His official final statement was later published by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He apologized to the Townsend family. He said he could not put into words the pain he had caused. He said he hoped his apology was enough. He said he had lived the rest of his life trying to take responsibility. He said he had never stopped praying that Bridget's family would forgive him. He said he owed them his life. Then he thanked his own family, his friends, and prison officials. And at the end of the statement, he said, "Warden, I'm ready." The execution began. AP reported that Gonzales was pronounced dead at 6:50 p.m. after a lethal injection. After the execution, Bridget Townsend's brother David spoke about what the moment meant for the family. AP reported that he said the family had finally witnessed justice being served. He said the day marked the end of a long and painful journey. But he also said they were not joyous or happy, describing it as a very sad day for everyone involved. That statement may be one of the most important parts of the case, because even when an execution goes forward, it does not erase grief. It does not bring back the victim. It does not undo the crime. It only ends the legal process.
Ramiro Gonzales' case is difficult because it does not fit into one simple category. It was not an innocence case. He confessed. It was not a case where the victim's family never received answers. He led authorities to Bridget Townsend's remains. It was not a case where the condemned man denied responsibility until the end. His final statement was an apology. But it was also not a case without controversy. His lawyers argued that he had changed. His supporters argued that he had become a different person in prison. A psychiatrist whose testimony helped support the death sentence later changed his view. Faith leaders asked for mercy. His legal team argued that the question of future dangerousness should have mattered. But Texas rejected those arguments. The state looked back to the crime, to January 15, 2001, to Bridget Townsend, to the kidnapping, to the sexual assault, to the killing, to the year her family spent without her body, to the other woman Gonzales had kidnapped and raped. And Texas decided the sentence should be carried out.
In the end, Ramiro Gonzales' story leaves two truths standing side by side. The first truth is that Bridget Townsend was 18 years old when her life was taken. Her family waited more than 20 years for the sentence to be carried out, and nothing Gonzales later did could return what was taken from them. The second truth is that Gonzales became one of the rare death row inmates whose case centered not on whether he did it, but on whether he had changed enough for that to matter. That is why his execution still raises a difficult question. When a man confesses, apologizes, spends years trying to change, and still faces death, what is the state punishing? The crime he committed? The person he once was? Or the person the law decided he could never stop being? On June 26, 2024, Texas gave its answer. Ramiro Gonzales apologized. He told the warden he was ready. And then the state executed him.